So first of all, even if a parent hasn't really heard what discovery learning is, I can pretty much guarantee that at some level their child is probably engaged in a form of discovery learning at school. Discovery learning, what is it? It's an approach to teaching that involves having students discover new information or concepts through exploration and problem solving. So the idea behind discovery learning, besides an attempt to increase student learning and performance, is to help make lessons more memorable and, of course, meaningful. So through the process of discovery, a student taps into the information and knowledge he or she already has and uses it to help make relevant connections to new pieces of information. So the discovery method attempts to place an emphasis on the interests of the learner. It's important to understand that in order for students to discover and make sense of new information, they should be allowed some freedom to explore new concepts using their own individual style of learning and through methods that interest them the most. So, the teacher in this case is more of a facilitator. Direct instruction, it's largely avoided since it can interfere with the process of discovery. So often a teacher will ask students questions to get them thinking or encourage students to express thoughts and ideas so that classmates can add to that discussion. That's why in a lot of classrooms you'll probably find desks that are grouped together so that the students have the opportunity to productively interact. There are a lot of reasons why educators get so excited about this approach. First, it's seen as the best way to teach in a world of ever-changing knowledge and information. So put another way, since we live in an information age and it moves so quickly, we need to make sure that students learn how to adapt to the constant changes that new information brings about. Second, discovery learning is supposed to promote the development of critical thinking skills. Since we want students who are able to solve complex and challenging problems, any subject or really any circumstance, then we need to find ways to encourage students to think beyond simply memorizing and regurgitating information. Discovery learning encourages students to work through problems, whether it's in math or social studies or what have you, and discovery methods and solutions based on what they're able to uncover on their own. Finally, since a good deal of importance is placed on the individuality and uniqueness of each student, discovery learning is one way to help highlight what makes a child distinctive. A one-size-fits-all approach to teaching doesn't allow for the unique talents, interests, and learning styles of each child to really shine through. So on the surface, the discovery method seems like a pretty good idea. And depending on the circumstances, I'd say, it can be a useful tool. But the question, is it effective, especially when we're talking about young elementary age students who presumably don't have a great well of knowledge or experience? Well, let's take a closer look. And that's where a number of problems that we can observe, and I mentioned that through the discovery method, students discover new information, procedures, and concepts by using their prior knowledge. Yet our schools seem to forget that these young students have very little knowledge on which to build upon in the first place. So there's three researchers, Clark, Kirshner, and Sweller. They study the best methods in which to teach students new content. So I'm going to quote something from their paper that's called Putting Students on the Path to Learning, the Case for Guided Instruction. Here's what they have to say. Decades of research clearly demonstrate that for novices, comprising virtually all students, direct, explicit instruction is more effective and efficient than partial guidance. So when teaching new content and skills to novices, teachers are more effective when they provide explicit guidance accompanied by practice and feedback, not when they require students to discover many aspects of what they must learn. Okay, so what is all that saying? In other words, the most effective way to teach a classroom full of students new content is to teach them directly, especially according to this study, not facilitate them or have them learn through their own process of discovery. Those three authors, Clark, Kirshner, and Sweller, they also point out that direct teaching is more efficient than discovery methods. So what do I mean by that? Well, teaching through discovery takes a lot of time, far more time, in fact, than directly teaching the material to the students. So, if you think about it, in order for students to learn through discovery, there are a number of things you'd have to incorporate into a lesson. You'd have to take into consideration everyone's individual learning styles. You'd have to allow for some form of collaboration between students. And as a facilitator, the teacher as facilitator, you would have to allow for students to make discoveries really at their own pace. So in order to move things along as the teacher, you wouldn't simply provide answers or tell students how to do something. You'd ask questions in order to get them thinking and to solve problems. And as you can imagine, trying to get through any lesson would probably take a very long time. So what you inevitably end up with are a bunch of kids with gaps in their learning because they haven't been able to cover all of the necessary material. So you also end up with compounding academic struggles, not only because necessary and a requisite knowledge isn't covered. You can't be sure that what a student discovers is very accurate at all. But I did mention that the Discover method, it can be a useful tool. It can, but usually when we're dealing with students in the senior secondary grades or college, since they already, or really they should have, a foundation of information and knowledge on which they can make legitimate and relevant discoveries. Look, it's not as though there's absolutely no place for the discovery process. I'd say when appropriate, we do want kids to try and make sense of the information and procedures that they're being taught. Unfortunately, as in the case in many aspects when it comes to education, our schools seem to completely throw out traditional yet really effective and proven methods in favor of the latest idea. A balance, in my opinion, it can be achieved. Direct teaching and more traditional forms of learning are the best way to convey new information, but some form of discovery can complement a teacher's efforts after a lesson has been taught. But for now, unfortunately, discovery learning as a standalone method is proving to be far less effective than our schools might have first hoped.